One man, one Murloc, one giant angry badger. This is Blue Please. It begins now. Yes, indeed, folks. Welcome to Blue Please here on CynicalBrit.com for the 26th of Feb 2010. It is 8 p.m. GMT. It's 3 p.m. in the East. In other places, it would be other heretical times. We can't condone them. Absolutely not. We shall hunt them down. We shall burn them and purge them with fire. Yes, what we are coming up for you in the show today. Many great things. A chance for you to win a StarCraft 2 beta key. This is for the podcast listeners as well as the live. You've got about a week to enter this one. I will tell you how shortly. You're going to have to hang on to that one. Plus, live interview, folks. Kevin Michael Johnson, he's the producer of a forthcoming documentary called The Raid. You might have heard of it if you've been hanging around on Tank Spot. They're involved in that. And we will give you the opportunity to hear what he has to say a little bit later on the show in a live interview. You'll also be able to ask questions in the IRC channel. That's irc.quakenet.org. Hash or pound Cynical Brit. Alternatively, webchat.quakenet... Try that again. webchat.quakenet.org. Punch Cynical Brit in there and get involved. Go hang around if you're listening live. Great content coming as well. Lots of questions to be asked, including how does one teach an entitled casual? You'll be finding out a little bit later on in the show. Bit of a story of redemption, maybe with a happy ending. Also, if I get the time, an analysis of the Plague Wing. A guild has finally gotten back on its feet, and we went and cleared the Plague Wing, killed Putricide, did all the good stuff. I'll be telling you about that a little bit later on in the show. Now, I'd love to talk to you about the new Blizzard developer chat, but yet again, they, funnily enough, scheduled it a few hours after this show ends. I can't imagine why that would be. They'll get it next week. We shall see. So... apparently you guys seem to like the Zerg Please thing that I did last week. So I'll have another one, and we'll sort the sound quality out this time. Got a brand new audio setup, shouldn't have too many issues this time around. And we'll do that at the end of the show. Those of you listening via podcast will get Zerg Please as a separate file. Those of you listening live, well, you can just hang around. And we'll be doing a commentary as I decide to go in for one of my first placement games. I haven't done any placement games yet in the leagues. So I'm going to go in there, I'm going to play it, I'm going to commentate on just how terrible I am. If you want to see how terrible I am, we've got a rather successful video series going on at the moment. Tweeted and Facebooked and promoted by Blizzard themselves. It's I Suck at StarCraft 2, which you can find on YouTube as well as my page on CynicalBrit.com. Go watch them if you want to see an absolute newbie perspective of StarCraft 2 from someone that barely ever played the original. Indeed. The gradual ascension from absolutely terrible to slightly less terrible. We'll see how that one goes. Right, we've got a ton of stuff to get through today, so let's just get right on with it.
Mail time! That sounds like it's mail time. Here's the mail.
It never fails.
It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes,
I want to wail.
Yes, indeed, it's time for the mail, as you might have imagined. So, here's one. Now, let's go and have a look at this one. There's some interesting mail that I got over the week. That's always nice. I don't like it when I get dull, boring, horrible mail. Yes, not pleasant at all. This one comes from Nicholas Bouquet. A bit flowery, perhaps. And he says this. He is the Guildmaster of the Dread Army on Lothar, US. Hey TB, I'm a few weeks behind still on Blue Please, shame on you. But I wanted to chime in on the situation with Insidia. Your commentary highlighted a problem I've always had with Blizz and all MMO publishers, and that's enforcement of their policies. Quite simply, there's no appeal process, and a bunch of computer programmers tend to not understand basic things like due process. Furthermore, as we've seen, you give someone a little power and it's just asking to be abused. See Kiki Jiki's forum ban a few years ago. Yes, I remember that, in fact. That wasn't too pleasant at all for anyone concerned. So, he then goes on and says, I know for a fact that Activision Blizzard has several big law firms on retainer for a variety of matters, including the one that I work for in the paralegal department. Why not ask one of those firms to serve as an appeals board? That's from Mortium. That's a good point, really, isn't it? Well, I think the answer to that one is quite simply this. Cost. You've got a tiny minority of players that are affected by these terrible decisions. Insidia, of course, being one group of those players. That's, 25 people were affected by this. And of course, there's some people that got angry about it, but the vast majority of people don't care. And then you've got a rather substantial group of people who are rather misanthropic when it comes to the community and just like to see other people fail. Yes, people like that exist, and it's kind of pathetic. However, you just have to deal with that. So, I don't think that Blizzard would ever do that. And to be fair, you don't need a legal department to provide this kind of information. It just needs an independent board. It needs people who are assigned specifically, who are not involved with the GM department in any way, shape, or form. They're also not involved in making the rules. It's called separation of powers. You should be aware of this if you're involved in law in any way. You've got the legislature, you've got the executive, and you've got the judiciary. The legislature make the rules, the executive enforce the rules, and the judiciary, well, the judiciary are the guys who judge whether or not the laws are fair and when to apply them. Effectively, that's your very basic way of describing it. You've got your legislature in the form of the guys who make the policy. You've got your executive, who are the GMs. So, where's your judges? Well, you don't have any. Therein lies the problem. Yeah, an appeals board for this kind of thing would be a good idea, and then that appeals board could pass down judgment and could pass down some kind of binding precedent, which could be used by the GMs. They can look through the big book of stuff, and it'll say in there, well, back in Blizz versus Leet Guy 420, we agreed that he was banned for this reason and the enforcement of the rules were correct. Or, Insidia versus Blizzard, they were banned for this reason, but we do not agree with the enforcement. Here's the interpretation of this, and this is what you've got to follow. Yeah, it could work, honestly, if you can get an independent board of people together in order to sort that out. I think it becomes more and more important as things go along that MMOs are starting to acquire a certain value. Of stuff in game, items, things like that, they acquire value. The top-end guilds, there's money involved, there's sponsorship involved. So it becomes a corporate issue. It becomes something a little bit more important than little Jimmy didn't get to play WoW today. So yeah, at that point, I think you do need some kind of watchdog. You do need some kind of accountability for the GMs, and not just have them handing out bans willy-nilly with absolutely no way to appeal against it. It's not good, honestly. I don't think it's good at all. And yeah, I would agree, it needs to be sorted out, although I wouldn't waste a law firm's time with it. All you need is a couple of independent developers or just Blizzard staff members. Hell, even players, as long as they're peer-reviewed. Right, we've got a couple of other emails here. We've got one from Mike, a.k.a. GDD. Try again. Yeah, let's rewind it slightly. Yep. A.k.a. DJ Timekiller, and he says this. Hello, hated TB. Thank you. A couple of days ago, MMO Champion posted news about Exodus being the first US guild to kill heroic putricide. Now, given the debacle of the exploited Yogg-Saron kill, I was wondering if you thought that any achievement that the Exodus guild does from this point forward would be seen as tainted. That's a good one, isn't it? It's entirely possible. I think that all guilds deserve the benefit of the doubt after a certain point. It's been a while since that happened, and guilds can make mistakes at the end of the day. Not all of them are malicious. Some of them are just not thinking straight and didn't quite think through their actions. Everyone makes a mistake from time to time, so I think that the player base absolutely will tar them with this is illegitimate. But you got to bear in mind the player base is generally incredibly stupid and is going to tar any endgame guild with this. Like, Insidia makes a mistake and suddenly the top 200 guilds in the world are all cheaters, even if they aren't. You know, even if Insidia isn't. And of course, we're not going to repeat that argument, but hey, we know for a fact that Exodus did cheat. They admitted it pretty much freely, waved the flag around and said, hey, we're awesome, then got banned for it. And, well, you know, that was thoroughly deserved. But I don't think it's fair to say that every kill after that of theirs is tainted and involved hacks. You know, guilds can learn their lesson. At the end of the day, if there's no proof of it, then you can't make those stupid accusations. Innocent until proven guilty. That's not going to stop the mewling masses and the populist nonsense, but do we really pay attention to those people? I certainly hope not. Generally speaking, they're incredibly foolish. That would be my simple answer to that, to be honest. There's not an awful lot more to say on it. So I'm not going to. Next email from Blood Guzzler. He's a level 80 Night Elf Rogue on Nazgrel US. And I can hear you guys in the chat room chomping at the bit to find out how to win a BlizzCon key. I'll tell you at the end of this segment. Patience, patience, patience. And yes, the BlizzCon key will give you access to StarCraft 2. So, this one comes from Fangs the Wolf, and he says, Dear the host of shows. Yes, the host of shows. So, he says maybe raids and dungeons have stood the test of time due to the excitement that it brought the players. I've seen 80s group up weekly for such raids as AQ and Karazhan. As we rapidly approach the next expansion, do you think there will be any Wrath of the Lich King material that level 80s and 90s will come back to in the future? Also, if a raid is rehashed or heavily altered, does the nostalgia factor disappear? Interesting question, really. It's funny because there's a lot of stuff that makes no sense, like going back to Karazhan and going back to AQ. Why do you go back to AQ20? There was like one good boss in that entire instance. I can understand AQ40. A couple of nice things there. Twins was pretty challenging at the time. That's quite iconic. Cthulhu was quite iconic. Iconic. Get it? Oh, God. Anyway. TBC, you've got people going back to Black Temple and Sunwell. Sunwell because it was really hard, quote-unquote, and Black Temple because it has an iconic boss in it. It's got Illidan. You don't see people going back to SSC and TK very often. You don't see them going back to Zolomon all that often. But Wrath the Lich King, Ulduar, honestly. They would go back to Ulduar, I think. Algernon and Yogg-Saron Zero and Mimiron Firefighter. They're very iconic fights that I think have earned something of a reputation, and some players do like to go back at higher level and just ruffle stomp it, and they feel good about that. I don't see any problem with that, honestly, as long as it's not happening in the current encounters. As regards to ICC, yeah, Putricide and Lich King, definitely. We'll definitely go and see Lich King, because, again, massive boss. It's the same as Illidan. Illidan might not have been an amazing fight, but he was an iconic character, and hence the reason that people wanted to go back there. So they keep going back to see Illidan and see the lore, see the voice acting and the scripted stuff, and yeah, they'll do that. As regards to anything else, well, they're certainly not going back to VOA, garbage heap that it is. I can't see them going back to Naxxramas. They already did that, and there's no reason now. And as regards to other stuff, well, TOC, no. What are they going to see? A Nubarak? They can already see that in a heroic, and to be fair, a Nubarak isn't that great a fight anyway. But it is interesting. The second question, of course, is whether or not, if a raid is altered, the nostalgia factor disappears. It could, really, but I think the best example of that is to look at Naxxramas. Where was the nostalgia factor in there? Well, the nostalgia factor was washed away because they ruined what made Naxxramas good in the first place. Was that when I think of Naxxramas, I think of Knights of Wiping on really hard 40-man bosses. I don't think of ruffle stomping the entire instance and getting handed a bunch of epics. I don't think of farming badges in Nax. Now, that's not what I think of at all. So, for me, the nostalgia factor of Naxxramas was ruined for me at that point, and that point alone. Now, if you go back to an instance and do the same thing, Onyxia's got the same problem. Onyxia became a joke. It wasn't even that hard to begin with, but when you first played Onyxia, you'd done no other raiding whatsoever. So it became an iconic fight for you. Even though it wasn't all that hard, it did set down a lot of raiding ground rules. You know, it set out the concept of a 3-phase encounter. It set out the concept of aggro dumps, aggro wipes. There is no aggro reset. It spawned a great meme. It set out the idea of loads and loads of ads and the controlling of said ads. It set out the mechanic of, if you don't get out of the way of this, you are dead. Now, that's a lot of really important stuff that's been incorporated into raiding since then. So that is a really iconic fight, which is why a lot of us were incredibly upset when they brought it back and said, here's a loot pinata for you to beat on that you can 5-man. That's upsetting. That was not the case, at least when Onyxia was first there. Obviously, at the end of it, when people were extremely powered up, Onyxia was killed by tiny, tiny groups. But we didn't expect that to happen so early on with Wrath when it was brought back in. It wasn't a celebration of raiding, it was really taking a dump on all that raiding represented. Which, funnily enough, is most of Wrath, actually. As opposed to Ulduar and some parts of ICC, yeah, it's a massive, stonking dump on everything that raiding's achieved over the past 5 years. Not good at all. Right, ladies and gentlemen, I said I would tell you how to win a StarCraft 2 beta key. Now, you've got to be patient for this one, because I'm announcing the winner on next week's show. That's to give the podcast listeners time to do this. So, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. You help out Blue Please, and we help out you with the beta key. So, this is what we want you to do. If you wish to win a StarCraft 2 beta key, you have to get onto iTunes and leave a review on Blue Please. Any review. I'm not asking for positive reviews, I'm asking for honest reviews. So, licking my boots and all that nonsense sycophancy that you know I hate is not going to get you anywhere. Now, once you've done that, take a screenshot of your review. Either, just once you've finished typing it, because it takes a little while to appear on the site. Take a screenshot of your review and email it to themurloc@gmail.com. That is themurloc@gmail.com. Take a screenshot with Paint, just save it as a JPEG, email it over, and I will randomly choose someone out of the hat on next week's show. So you go do that, go help out Blue Please, and we will help you out with the beta key. Right, ladies and gentlemen, would you like to hear some music for the brand new Finn Troll album? I certainly would. This only came out a few days ago. It goes by the name of Den Frusnamunen. I'll be right back after this, folks, to tell you about a redeemed entitled casual. Enjoy.